Yeah.
Were you one of the top in the class?
I was in the upper third of the class.
Wow.
When I went in there, when I reported aboard, there was first class electrician's mate teaching. He was the instructor. And he looked down and seen reserve.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "What the hell are you doing here?" He said, "Go sit in the back and don't give me any trouble." Well, the Navy, when you go to a Navy school, it's an 8-hour-a-day school.
Yeah.
And they give you homework to take back to the barracks for the next day. And when you go in the morning, they had a little box on the door and there was answer sheets.
Mm-hmm.
And you would take a answer sheet out and there was a 10-question test on your homework every day.
So you check and see.
So the instructor would know whether you read the material right away.
Yeah.
It was a 10-question test. And I would get 8, 9 questions right. And you self-graded it.
Yeah.
And then he would have you yell out he'd yell out your name and you'd say how many questions you got right, you know. So I was in the upper third of the class. And at the end of the 2-week cycle, their final test, you had to wire a circuit.
Yeah.
That they gave you. They gave you everything to wire that circuit up on a circuit board. And they gave you one fuse. And you wired it up. And when you were ready, you'd have the instructor come over.
Yeah.
And he'd look at it. And he had one fuse in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "You think that's right?" "Yeah, it's right." So you only get one fuse. Now, if you blow that fuse, you fail the test completely because you had to take readings in that circuit to answer questions.
Wow.
So you'd say, "Check it again." So you'd go over and check it. Okay. And you come back. Okay, give you the fuse. You put the switch in. And then you had meters and answered questions.
Did you ever fail?
No.
Did a lot of people?
There was a few. There was a couple guys that couldn't wire, but that's how they weeded you out.
Yeah.
It was a weeding process.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had that guy that was a troublemaker, you'd make sure he got watch, that he'd have the midnight to 4 in the morning watch. Well, you get 4 or 5 of those and you're not going to pass.
Yeah.
Because they gave you enough to study that by the time lights out went, most of the guys were in the bathroom where there was a light on.
Really?
Still doing homework and reading and stuff.
Wow.
So it was highly intensive. And if you were up every night till 4 in the morning and then you got up at 6, you're sick. You're falling asleep in class.
Were you ever like that?
No.
No?
No. No.
So what year did you, and how old were you when you entered the Navy?
17.
17?
I was 17 on March 1st, and I went down immediately, and I got a physical, and they said I needed 4 teeth to be pulled.
To get them pulled?
Yeah, because they wouldn't accept me.
Oh.
So they said, when you get these 4 teeth pulled, you come back. So I did. I went to the dentist. I said, yank them out. He pulled them all out. And the next week, it was around the 30th of March that I enlisted.
Yeah.
So I enlisted. I was 17 years old. I was in the 11th grade at high school. I went to Great Lakes the end of May. I had to get out of school early because we didn't get out of school until June.
Yeah.
School year went to June. And they were giving me a hard time. I said, I don't care what you think. I got a set of orders
Yeah.
that says I've got to be at Great Lakes on this date.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm going. I've got to go. So I got on the train at midnight in Youngstown. It was a Saturday night at midnight. I had to leave Saturday night. The train was at midnight to Chicago. They had the Navy gave me tickets to go on.
Were you nervous at all? Or just excited?
Yeah, it was different because I hadn't been away from home, things like that. So we went up. It took us from Youngstown to Chicago. We didn't get into Chicago until about 6 in the evening.
Wow.
It took that long. That train stopped at every station. And we had to eat our lunch on the train. They gave us a meal voucher to eat on the train. So we ate lunch on the train. And I think we had breakfast too. We had breakfast and lunch on the train.
Did you, were you the only person going for boot camp, or was the whole train pretty much filled?
No, it was me and my buddy,
Yeah.
Dave. We both signed up together and we both went together.
So you had someone to talk to on the ride.
It was just us two guys, two 17-year-old kids. And we got off in Chicago, and then we had to take an L train
Yeah.
to Great Lakes in North Chicago. And by the time they checked us in, it was 8 o'clock in the evening.
Wow.
And we hadn't had supper. So they opened up a chow hall and put us all in there. There was a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
There were probably 300 or 400 guys
Wow, that must have
checking
been.
in. So they lined us all up, and we went in. My first meal in the Navy was some stale bread that had been out all day, a spoonful of cold beans, baked beans, and some lunch meat. And that was my meal. And I always said when I looked at that fence, and that fence was pretty high, or rather I was going to go home. But you got in, I was in a company of 60 guys. We had 60 guys in one room, one great big room in a barracks. We were on the second floor of a barracks. Second deck, not floor. And first thing they did, they took us down and we had to buy what they called clothes stops, which was a piece of string, but it's more like little rope,
Yeah.
and it had stops on the end of them, so it didn't fray. Metal stops. That was our clothespins. We had to hang our clothes up. When we washed our clothes, you had to hang them up with these pieces of rope,
Yeah.
and you had to tie them in a square knot. And if you didn't tie them in a square knot, the chief would come in and rip them down and step all over your clothes. So you go in, you had a drying room, and you go in to check, see if your clothes was dry, and if you didn't have them tied up right, they were laying on the floor with foot marks all over them.
Oh. See, I don't even know how to tie knots. Like,
So you had to redo your clothes. We had to buy a scrub brush, and that was that was our washing machine. A box of Tide. So we had clothes stops and Tide and a wooden scrub brush. And they had a big wash tables. They were tables,
Yeah.
stainless steel, and you had spigots over this. It was slanted this way, and they had spigots hanging over.
yeah.
And you would put your clothes up there and wash them and put some soap on it and,
Yeah.
and scrub them and then rinse them off and then hang them up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you use the back of the brush, the wooden brush, in your hand and you put creases in your uniform. You didn't have nobody had an iron.
Yeah.
So you had to crease your clothes with your hand, and you had to dry that crease in your clothes.
Oh, that must have been hard.
So, and then when it got done, you'd stick them under your mattress and sleep on them,
Yeah.
and that pressed them.
So would that be like a weekly thing, or?
Well, whenever you got dirty,
Did you do a lot of running and stuff?
We didn't run so much. We marched.
You marched?
We marched.
Did you have to swim?
We had to swim. We had to take a swimming test.
See, I've never, well, we always hear stories about the Navy, but I've never heard stories about boot camp. Like, no one ever asked you what you had to do during boot camp.
Well, the thing in boot camp was they taught you, the chief come in and he said, everybody shaves,
Yeah.
whether you need it or not. He said, I don't care if you don't have any beard yet. So you don't have to put a razor blade in the razor.
Yeah.
But you're going to put cream on your face, shaving cream, and you're going to scrape it off every day.
So you're all unified?
So everybody had to shave. We had to take a shower every day. And we had to fold our clothes up, and all our clothes had to be rolled into a cylinder. And the way our uniforms were made, they were made so that you could fold them and roll them up, and they'd come out to about that big, and they'd be about that big around. And then those clothes stops that they gave you,
Yeah.
that you tied them up, you would tie them and then put them in your locker. You only had a little tiny locker, and there were cubicles in there, and you had a cubicle for your jumper, your jumpers, so you could put your jumpers in there, and then they had cubicles for your trousers, for your work shirts, for your underwear, for this, for that. They had little drawers that you could lock, and you could put your wallet, any money you had,
Yeah.
and your shaving gear and stuff in that drawer, and close it and lock it. But then your locker could be opened, and the chief would come by and make sure that you had everything the way it was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you had. And then your bed, you had a mattress cover. Your mattress was about that thick. And you had what we called a fart sack. And it was just a sack you put, it was like a pillowcase, only for the whole mattress. And you got one pillow and you got one blanket.
Mm-hmm.
So your pillow had to be so far from the edge of the bunk, and you had to fold your blanket and put it at a certain distance. And you were given a Blue Jackets manual,
Yeah.
and the width of the book was up. And you put that, and you put your thing, and that there. So everybody's mattress, everybody's blanket, everybody's pillows, you could look down the line in the barracks and see them all that way.
Yeah.
So, and then we had to have leggings. We had to have leggings that went over our shoes, and they went over our shoes and up around our calves. We had to wear them, and you had to wear a guard belt and a poncho.
Mm-hmm.
And the poncho was for rain, but that had to be rolled and then tied onto your guard belt. On your guard belt. And then they issued you a rifle that you had to carry every place you went.
Mm-hmm.
So when we would march, we'd march, and we marched for everything. You marched to class. We had classes all the time in boot camp. And the classes were like history of the Navy.